relish, pleasing or zestful flavor.
A quantity just sufficient to flavor, to be pleased or gratified by, enjoy.
We are hoping that what we bring to your table today might add some spice to your life.
How we doing, Don?
I don't know. We'll see what your question's like today. We got a little wordy that last time. That was a long episode. I hope you folks didn't fall asleep in that one.
Yeah. Well, we're back with more questions for Don, and I'm just as excited as you guys are to hear what he
You're
has
probably more
to say.
excited than I am right now.
Yeah. Probably there's good reason for that, though.
You got some hard questions. Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right. We'll start with, I've always been interested in how people in Old Testament times could live till there was Methuselah 969. Yeah, how they could live that long. So I was wondering what aging was like. Do we know?
Oh, man. I hope it was slower than what it is going right now, because at 767, I'm sort of feeling, oh, man.
Noah built the ark at
500 years old.
Yeah.
Noah built the ark. Can you imagine being that agile and working with gopher wood, which is sort of like hedge, and putting together an ark? No wonder it took him 100 years working with that kind of wood. What we do know is that something happened back in verse 6. Okay. In chapter 6, then the Lord said in my spirit, I will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. And so we know that as part of the flood, God had changed his mind on how long people would live. We know that people died. I mean, even at 900 years, that sounds long to us, but people died, every one of them, except Enoch, of course, was taken by the Lord. And so death was part of the lifespan, just like now. They weren't having kids till their hundreds.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guarantee you, I'm not really thinking about kids right now, having kids at 67.
I was going to say picture that, but don't picture that.
Let's not picture that. We're not going there. So obviously the lifespan and, say, maturity was different in that period of time. I don't know whether at 17, you were getting married or what you were doing, or if you were still in diapers. I don't know.
Yeah.
And when you can put it into a 900-year lifespan, I think probably maturity was much like it was now. But that adult and the age and the things that take away our vitality and health towards the end of life, it seems like what happened was all of a sudden it was crunched up. And if you look at timeline of the people who lived during that time, Noah had a long lifespan, and he would have lived to Terah's time, which would have been, Terah would be Abraham's dad. So he lived all through that period post-flood. So see, it was 500 years, built the ark. That's 600 years. And then you can study in the next few chapters between chapter 9 and chapter 12 of Genesis. And you see that all that stuff that went on with the Tower and Babel and all that, Noah would have been alive for. He would have witnessed that.
Wow.
So then Terah decides to move, and Abraham with him, and they go to Ur, and Terah could have actually done business with Noah. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
They could have had business, been in business. They obviously were related. And when you get that in your mind and then realize that Terah he died, and then Abram went on to the promised land. It starts to put it in perspective that it was very sudden that the lifespan changed. And it was post-flood. So Noah would have been known as a real old man.
Yeah.
Because people were getting old and dying before he actually died. I mean, Terran would be one of those individuals who would have been born after the flood, but still didn't die that much farther after Terran or Noah. So, yeah.
Interesting.
It's something that God ordained that, 120 years, that's got to be the max. And I think we've seen it then dial down from there. But, yeah.
All right.
I'd like to have this vitality at 100. Then I'd be all right.
Yeah. Okay. Staying in the Old Testament, what was the purpose of clean and unclean animals?
Well, I think it had more to do with the biology involved. So clean animals and unclean animals, it had to do with what they ate. And so if you look in the Old Testament, you'll see a theme start to emerge, especially after the Exodus, that had to do with how God would keep his people free of disease. And okay, so a pig was considered unclean. And it was considered unclean because of what it ate, because it could pick up microbial kinds of things that would be transferred to humans through what it ate. Trichinosis, is it? What? Yeah, I think it's trichinosis. Somebody can
something.
And so it seemed like God was taking those things that would transmit disease to his people and saying, you're not supposed to eat those. And then, and it was a culture that didn't have the things that we have today that could fight those things. So then, and they didn't cook things like we do.
Yeah.
The preparation was different. You'll also notice that in the Old Testament, already at the time of the Exodus, they're talking about hand washing, and other cultures weren't doing those kind of things. There was no stipulations in their religious laws as to whether you washed your hands or didn't. But the Jews had it. And because the Jews had it, they were a stronger group of people. So several of those stipulations, like clean and unclean, had to do with God's way of protecting his people and keeping them strong.
All right. So it's like a father knowing what's best.
It really is. Basically, it falls into that category. Yeah. Daddy knows best, Listen to the father. He has got this plan. And then it's interesting how that changes then in the New Testament and why. Yeah.
Okay. Easy enough.
So I imagine I can just see it out there. Somebody's going to bring the rest of that question all these times.
Yeah. All right.
We'll just wait for it, okay?
What do we learn from God based on his creation? If we look at creation,
what can we learn from God? Learn from God and about God.
Yeah.
In his creation. I think it's really neat because you look at all the science that went into creation, even the days and their order, how intricate even our biblical text, those who call it myth, I don't think realize how intricate those days are in the science behind what happened. So we have a very organized, calculated God who has thought through a lot of things that we never even calculate, like the disease and how long can plants go without the atmosphere being created and without getting rain, all those pieces that are part of the creation narrative. And then when you see that creator God, know full well that the tree that he puts in the garden of the knowledge of good and evil, even though he desperately says don't eat of it, they will. And eventually, then he would send his son to break that curse. That's still a creative God. And it's a loving God. And it's a God who's got all the angles covered. Even the angles we don't even know need covered at the time. God's got them covered. So it's a God that has all those angles taken care of. Probably more angles taken care of for us than we even realize. So can we put our lives in the hands of a God like that? Yeah, I can do that. I can handle that.
Yeah. You're knocking these off.
I'm knocking these off. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I was good. Wow, these questions are getting hard.
All right.
Yeah. Go for it.
You got more to say? Or
no.
Okay. How can we use some of these seem to be worthless Old Testament books like Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy? How can we apply those to our lives, if anything, or learn from them, or are they relevant at all?
Well, I think you sort of covered these in your first two questions, because I'll use your question as an answer. In other words, when you think about Leviticus, first consider its context and how God was hoping to bring this people out of Egypt, through the Exodus, and have them alive at the other end. You take a bunch of people and you roll them across the desert, and the object of getting them to the other side alive is sort of high. And how do you do that? Well, you give them guidelines to go by. And Leviticus is one of those books that has a lot of rules in it. Lots of rules. Yeah. But if you look at those rules as to how it saved them, maybe not spiritually, there's some of that, but it saved them physically from death, from illness, by some of the Levitical law, because washing your hands.
Yeah.
Levitical law. Don't eat raw meat. Don't eat meat with blood in it. And why don't you do that? Well, because you can get sick with that kind of treating meat that way. And cooking it all the way through. That's all in that book of Leviticus, because God wanted to deliver his people to the other side live, not dead. That would not have served him well at all.
Yeah. And
so if you look at the book of Leviticus as God's plan to get them through and to the other side, then you can read it in 2025 and say, well, some of that still has some precedent for us today. But, we do have microwaves. We cook things. Mm-hmm. Some of us have ovens, convection ovens. You can really cook it fast. And so you can use those things to cook. And of course, then there's those people that eat sushi. Oh my gracious sakes. You say, well, you got sick for a reason. No. Anyway, yeah. God bless you if you like sushi. We'll let you eat it anyway.
I'm on your side on this one.
But okay, good deal. But the book of Leviticus was basically given to the people as a way of saying, hey, God loves you. God's going to, he knows more about creation than you do. And this is how he says to eat. Now, granted, the Pharisees would take it to a high level and say, well, you're out of our communion. You're out of our faith. We're going to stone you to death if you don't do such and such and such and such. But it was really God's way of saying, hey, I care for you as a people, and I'd like for you to get to the other side alive, and to be a strong people and a healthy people. So that's the way I see the book of Leviticus. It still has that kind of application in our world today.
Is it similar for some of the following books, like Numbers and Deuteronomy?
Yeah, because they both have to do with certain laws and how you treat things and do things. I would treat it. The difference in some of that is Deuteronomy has more to do with the temple and temple objects. Numbers also has some of that as well. And so it talks about worship and separating a space for God. And that still speaks to us today. Let's make a separate place for God, a place of honor for our Lord. Some of us call it church buildings, but the church is actually us assembled.
Yeah, community of believers.
Yeah. Yeah, make sure God has a special place in your life.
Yeah. Well,
that's sort of taking the broad stroke to Deuteronomy. That's a broad stroke.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a big paintbrush.
Well, thank you as always, Don.
Good to have these discussions, Rowan.
Yeah.
Good questions. And I hope they're good questions to talk about at your house, and maybe it'll spice up the conversation at your house. And you can even go in the comments and add to the comments, if you will. And we'll talk more about those things.
We will. Yeah. Throw some questions down there. Let us know.
That's right.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next time.
Lord willing.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Feel free to become part of this ministry by sharing it with others. Our goal is to help each other grow deeper in our understanding of who God is and His calling to us in our daily lives. Thank you again for joining us, and may God bless your day.